Okay, good morning. We're on 74b at the bottom, about 4 lines from the bottom. And the Mishnah had said that if you have a wine press that was um, sealed with some kind of sealant pitch, and that had wine of Avodah Zarah mixed into it. How do you make the wine press kosher? So the Mishnah said if it's stone, then menagva. Literally, you dry it, although it could actually mean more like scouring, as we'll see. Um, and that removes the layer of forbidden wine from the press. So, but menagvan, how do you do that? Rav Amar B'mayim, Rav says with water, basically you rinse it. Rav Amar Bar Amar Be'efer, you use ash. So it's a little unclear to me if this means to absorb the wine on the wine from the surface of the pitched wine press, or if it means you use the ash as a scrubber, as a scourer. Rav b'mayim, when Rav says water b'mayim v'lo b'efer, does he mean exclusively with water, that ash doesn't work? Rav bar Chana b'efer v'lo b'mayim, and does Rav bar Chana, when he says ash, does it mean exclusively with ash and water doesn't work? Ella, that's not the case. The Gemara says Rav amar b'mayim v'hu adin le'efer. Rav says you could use water, you could also use ash. Rav bar Chana amar b'efer v'hu adin l'mayim. The first, so the way we have to understand this is that Rav says first use water and then ash, and Rav Chana says first ash and then water. Even though that's unclear what that's not what the literal language of the Gemara means, but that's how Rashi and the Mefarshim explain it. Otherwise, there's no difference between them. If they're both saying either water or ash, there's no difference. So the Gemara is understanding this to mean what's the order that you do it in: water and ash according to Rav, ash and water, and then water according to Rabbah. V'lo plige. But actually, there still is no, they're not arguing with each other. Haber tifsa, habiyabeshta. The difference is whether the wine press itself, whether the surface is still moist or if it's dry. So, Rabbi Chana says first use ash and then water. That's talking about a a moist uh, a moist surface. So then the ash scrubs or absorbs the moisture, and then you rinse it off. And Rav is talking about a dry wine press. First, you have to put on the water, and then you can absorb with the ash or scrub with the ash. Itmar Be Rav Mishmed Itmar Be Rav Mishmed Rav Amrei. The students at Rav's yeshiva said in his name Tarte Plus. Um, it could be 2 steps or 3 steps. If it's dry, there's 2 steps, water and ash, and 3 steps if it's moist, it's ash, water, and then ash again. And Shmuel Amar, but Shmuel says tlas arba. No, it's 3 or 4 steps. 3 steps if it's moist, it's ash, water, and ash, and 4 steps if it's dry. So you do water, ash, water, ash. Basura masni hachi. That's how they taught it in Surah. But Pumbedisa masnu and Pumbedisa, a different yeshiva, they taught like this. Be'rav Amrei Mishmei Rav. Rav's student said in his name, tlas arba. The process is either 3 or 4. So if it's dry, it's water, ash, water, and if it's moist, then it's ash, water, ash, water. Shmuel Amar Arba Chamesh. Shmuel says no, it's 4 steps or 5 steps. If it's moist, it's ash, water, and 5 steps if it's dry, water, ash, water, ash, water. Okay, v'lo plige, and they're not really arguing with each other. Marco Chashiv Maya Basrai. In Pumbedisa, they actually have the same opinion, but do they count the final rinsing or not? So in Pumbedisa, they list that explicitly. Umar Chashiv Maya Basrai, and the other one considers it obvious that you have to rinse it at the end, and it's not listed. So they really both agree. Rabbi Ovo. They asked Rabbi Ovo, Hani Gurge Daramai Mai. What about these things called gurge? So gourget is some kind of a lattice that's wrapped around the grapes while you're pressing them. So, like to hold them together, kind of like think of a net. How do you kosher those? Amar lahu Rabbi Avo Tanisua. We have a Bryce on that. Haresha Gitov base badav tameim. If your winery or your olive press was tame, ubi kishlasosim b'tar, and you want to kosher it, hadapin v'hadashin v'halulavin. the boards and the what you step on and the brooms. These are all parts of the press or parts of the process. Medichan, you rinse them. V'ha'akolin v'shel nitzarim v'shel batzbutz minaglan. But the net of like apparently this means wicker or hemp, which is analogous to what we're asking about the gurgai. So you dry them. V'shel shifa v'shel gummy miyashnon shemasar chodesh. If they're made of shifa or gummy, so this is some kind of a bulrush kind of thing, and they're very absorbent. So it's harder to kasher them. You wait 12 months so that they kind of they dry out, and that nullifies the yayin nesach in it. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Manichan migas legasu mibad lebad. You don't have to wait a whole year. You have to wait like a season, like the from one pressing till the next. In other words, till I think means till the next season, and that's how long you have to wait. Hainu Tanakama, isn't that the same as the Tanakama, right? Because a season is a year. Ikabenau chorfe va'afle. If it's like if you could have seasons in which the crop ripens early or late, so it could be less than a year if you have a late crop and then an early crop, so it's actually less than a year, but it is a full season between the times that you use the press. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Harotz L'Tara Miyad, if you want to make them kosher right away, Mak'ilon Beroschin or Cholton B'meizesim. You either pour boiling water over them, um, or you boiling water, or you use kind of olive water. So when you cure olives, when you prepare olives, you pour hot water over them to soften them up so that you could get the oil out of them. So you could pour this hot water on the netting, and that'll work right away. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Omer, Menichan tachas sinor shemem of mekalchin. You put them under some running water, obamayan shemem of rodfim, or a spring of running water. V'kama, for how long? Oh no, for a period of time. We'll see what that is in a minute. And just the same way that you can kasher something that has been contaminated with the yayin nesach, kachamru b'taros. Same with taharos, with taharos. So klapilaya, what do you mean by that? Like, which one are you comparing to what? The taharos kaiminan. We're talking about taharos. Um, if you're talking about taros, then you can't. Um, yeah. So regarding, one second. So this brisa was taught about taros, so you can't figure out their status from yayin nesach. Ella could derech shomer b'taros kacham yayin nesach. It's the other direction. Um, the ruling about taros is also applied to yayin nesach. Kama ona. So what does an ona mean? This period of time. Amar Chibar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, O Yom Olayla, a day or a night. Rabbi Chana She'ina ve'Amrila Rabbi Chana Bar She'ina Amar Rabbi Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chana said, Chatzi Yom v'Chatzi Laila. It doesn't have to be a full day or a full night. It could be like half a day and half a night combined. Amar Shmuel Bar Yitzchak v'lo plige. There's no argument here. Habit kufas Nisan v'Tishrei. If you say it's a whole day or a night, so that's when when the days and nights are more or less equal, like in the fall or the spring. Habit kufas Hamuz v'Tevis, but in the winter or the summer, so a half of a day and a half of a night, when they're not equal. So in other words, if you say in the winter a full day, that's actually could be like 8 hours, right? Rather than 12 hours. So by saying half of a day and half of a night, you always come out to 12 hours. Whereas in the at the spring, particularly around the equinox or the fall equinox, um, a full day is more or less 12 hours. Of course, this isn't very exact because as you get away from the equinox, like how far from the equinox are we allowing this? So it seems like it's not a particularly exact measure, but like don't abuse it by taking, the solstice, a day in the winter solstice, which is much shorter than a full, 24-hour day. Don't do it that way. Amarida, Hane Rav Ke Daramai. Um, how do you kasher um, these sacks of the Arameans? So these are like bags to hold the sediments of the wine. Um, like a strainer. So think of a cheesecloth, right? You put the grapes in the bag, and the juice seeps out. So how do you kasher those? Demazia medichan. If they're made of hair, then you wash them. The amra, if they're made of wool, menagvan, you dry them. The kitna, if they're made of cotton or linen, maybe miyashnan, you have to age them for 12 months. Wait till they get old, literally, um, because they're more absorbent. Vika katre sharilahu. But if they are, and if they're tied up, if they're knotted, you first have to untie them so that because the knot can retain liquid better than an unknotted plain sack. And honey dekulev chalasa daramai. What about these sieves that are used by the Arameans? The chaite bechavle detsuri. If they're made of ropes of palm fibers, medichan, you wash them. The tzavta, if they're made of some kind of a Rashi says it's a kind of gemi, a kind of rubber or some kind of a um, whatever kind of plant this is, then you dry them. The kitna, if they're made of linen, miyashnan, you have to wait for 12 months. Vis bukitre sharlu, and if they're not, you have to untie them, like we said before. Itmar, amaretz shehoshi yada. If you have an amaretz, someone who is considered tame, um, and he puts his hand into a wine press, v'naga b'ashkolos, and touches the grapes. Rabbi Chia chadamar eshkol v'chol sevivos of tameim. The grape that he touches and everything around it is tamei. V'chol gas kula Torah, but the rest of the content, if you remove that, everything is fine. Chadamar kol gas kula nami tamei. The whole batch is spoiled. Um, so this is a machlokas in how um, so you would think that the what he touches is a rishon latuma, and those grapes which are touching the ones that he touched become a sheni latuma, but they shouldn't um, transmit tuma further. So it's a little unclear why you would consider the whole thing tame. Um, Well, Mandiamar Eshkol Chosrivosov Tameim, the one that says it's only the immediate neighborhood that is Tameh, V'chalagas Kula Torah, but everything else is Torah. Maishnome Haditnan. Why is this from the following Mishnah? Sheretz Shnimsa Barechaim. A sheretz is found in a mill, an olive press. Only the olives that it's touching are Tameh. We are on 75b, getting close to the Mishnah, near the top of the page. But if it was like liquidy, if it's already being pressed and the olive oil is flowing, then hakol tame. Then everything can be, then it touches the liquid goes everywhere, the whole batch is contaminated. So how is that different than our case? Hasam lamafsek v'lamide. In the case of the sherets, there's nothing separating the sherets and the other everything else in the press. But here, in the case of the Amaretz who touches grapes in the press, um, there's other um, it's like there are still distinct items and there's distinct bunches of grapes. Whereas in the olive press, once you've started crushing it, it's all like one big mash. So when you touch any part of it, the whole thing can become tame. Where in the case of the grapes, if there's still bunches of grapes that are distinct from each other, then only what you touch and maybe the things that are touching them, only those things become tame, and everything else can be remain tahar. Overlay Rabban Rabbi Yirmiyah, V'Yamri Lebreda Rabbi Yirmiyah. The rabbis taught to Rabbi Yirmiyah, or to his son perhaps, Kediri Eshkol, Kediri Omer, Eshkol, L'chol Svivosov, Tameim, L'chol Gaskul Tahara. We rule like that the only the bunch of grapes that he touches and things around it are Tameh, but the rest of the batch is fine. Okay, next Mishnah. Um, Now, what about, so we've talked about the wine press and how you can kosher it. What about other things? If you buy utensils for use with food from Ovdei Kochavim, if it is something that needs to get tevila, then you do that. If it's something that needs hagala, which is purging it with heat, then with boiling water, then you do that. Lalabein ba'ur, something that requires being heated in fire. Yalbein ba'ur, you do that. Hashapud va'askala malabnam ba'ur, and a spit or a grill, you definitely use libun for that. Hasakin safa v'hitahara. And shafa, sorry, hasakin shafa v'hitahara. A knife, you basically scrape it, you sharpen it or whatever, you scrape off the surface and then it's fine. Okay, so a lot of interesting concepts here that are actually very practical when it comes to your kosher kitchen. So Tana, we have a brisa. V'chulan tzrichin tevila b'arbaim. When you say tevila, they all need and they all need to be put in a mikvah of 40 sa. Where do you get that from? As the Torah says, Amar of the Amar Kra, Kol Davar Asher Yava Baish Tavu Baish V'Taher. So this is all based on the spoils of the battle with Midian, right? So they were instructed when they brought the spoils how they kosher everything. So anything that the Torah says, anything that goes in fire, in other words, that you use with fire, then you put it in fire and becomes tahar. And here it doesn't mean tahar regarding tumantaro. We're talking about we're applying this to kashrus. Hosuch kosuv tara acheres. So when it says v'taher and it becomes tahor, so it's not just the fire; it's also you have to put it in the mikvah. Since it says b'mei nida yischata, it has to be purified with mei nida. Um, so it sounds like it's saying that you need sprinkling of the water. Um, of the water that makes it tahor on the third and seventh day, which is the standard for making things tahor. That when we do the paraduma, there's like the sprinkling on the third day and the seventh day. Talmud Lomar. Ach, chalak, but I would have thought that, but the Torah says ach b'mei nida yischata. The word ach limits that. So you don't need the third and seventh day sprinkling. Imkain, matam and lomer b'meinida. So why does it say meinida, which appears to refer to the paraduma kind of purification with sprinkling on the third and seventh day? Maim shenida tavelasman. We're talking about waters that a woman who is a nida goes to the mikvah. So we know how that goes, right? You go to a mikvah of 40 sa and you become tahor. So when it says meinida, it means that doesn't mean the paraduma kind of sprinkling. It means going in the mikvah. So that tells you it's a 40 saw mikvah we're talking about. Okay. And Itzrich l'michtav v'tar, v'Itzrich l'michtav v'meinira. It has to say both of these things, right? Because we use two words to get at the rule. that it has to go in the mikvah. Why does it have to write both? Ikas of Atar, it only says and becomes tahor, and the and there, Havamin of Atar koldehu. Maybe any, even a smaller mikvah. It doesn't have to be an official 40 saw mikvah. It could be just a small basin of water. So it tells you, no, it's like, like a regular mikvah, like you use for a nida, for a woman who's a nida. Because Rahman b'mei nida, havamina, hariv shemesh kanida. If it only said b'mei nida, you know what else a nida has to do? She has to wait till nighttime, goes to the mikvah, and then if she goes during the day, you need to wait till nighttime. Because Rahman v'tar la'alter. So that's why it says also v'tar that no, you don't have that requirement. It's just the 40 saw requirement. Amar Nachman Rav Bar Avua, afilu kenu chadashim mashma. This tells you that even new utensils that were never used for anything before require going to the mikvah as we practice. How do I know that? Because old old utensils that you want to make kosher. And so what do? You put it in fire, right? Libun, hagal, or whatever you need, but then it becomes like something new. Now it's a new item, and still you have to put it in the mikvah. What does that accomplish? That tells you that to make something kosher, you have to put it, even if it's new, you have to put it in the mikvah. Maskil far of sheshes. If that's the case, so like maybe it has nothing to do with food, right? Maybe you buy a pair of scissors. Do they have to go to the mikvah? Amalei, Klesuda, Amurim B'Parsha. No, the Torah is talking about things that are used for food and not other kinds of tools. In other words, because it says if it's used you know, with fire or whatever, so we're talking about things that you cook with. And putting something in the mikvah is only needed if it's bought from the Avodah Zarah person, like it was acquired from them, like they acquired from the spoils from Midian. But if it still belongs to that person and you borrow it, that doesn't require tefillah. Rabbi Yitzchak bought this marda, which is what is a marda? Rashi says, uh, made out of earth and dung. So basically, it's kind of a clay utensil. So he bought something from an Ovid Kochavim, Savar Latbila, and thought he had to put it in the mikvah. Amalei Hahumi Rabbanon Rabbi Yaakov Shmei, one of the rabbis who was Rabbi Yaakov said to him, "Odidim partially mine Rabbi Yochanan." Rabbi Yochanan explained this to me. Clay matechos parsha. What has to go in the mikvah? Only metal items need tefillah and not clay type items. Amar Vashi, Hani clay zachuchis. What about glass? Since you can, if you break a glass thing in half and then you glue it back together, then that makes it like a metal utensil, right? And so it does require tefillah. Kunya. Kunya is some kind of a clay utensil with a metal layer, a metal coating. Pliga ravacha ravina. There's a machlokas on that. Chalamar kischilaso. One says it's like it started out as a clay thing. It was already a useful, and then you added metal. That doesn't matter. It's earthenware, and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to. Chalamar kisofo. And the other says no, since the final state of this thing is metal coated, so it's considered metal. It does need to be a lot. And that's the halach. They ask, Mashkanta mai. What about if you take something as collateral for a loan? So, it's kind of ownership because if the borrower defaults, you get to keep the thing, right? On the other hand, the intention is that he gets it back when he pays the loan. So what is this like? Is it like borrowed or like bought? Amar Baravashi. Abba mashkan le ovli kochavim kasa l'chasva. An idol worshiper, gave my father a silver cup as a security for a loan, and he put it in the mikvah and then he used it. I don't know if that's because he held that that collateral is like something that you bought and it requires tefillah, imishum dechasi lo kochavim dedati l'shakuai, or because, like, ordinarily he would say the security is going to go back to the borrower, but in this case, he could tell that the borrower had no intention of repaying the loan, and he knew he was going to end up keeping the thing, and so that's why he already took it to the mikvah. So he doesn't know. So that we haven't answered that question. Tana Rabbanan, you buy utensils from an other kochavim, dvarim shel nishtamish ben, things that he hadn't used yet, madbilim, just put in the mikvah v'hem taharim, and that's fine. Dvarim shel nishtamish ben al yidei tzana, if you used it only for coals, food, so kagon kosos v'kisonos utzlochios, like cups or scoops, or flasks, madichan umatbilim himtar. You just rinse them out, and then you put them in the mikvah, and they're fine. Things that are used to cook with, hayoros hakumkus musin umachamechamin, like pots and kettles and urns that use hot with hot liquid. You use it on the heat. Magilon matbilim himtar. First, you have to do hadala, and then you have put them in the mikvah, and then they're fine. Or if they're used directly with fire, like spits and grills. You do libun, which means you have to heat it up to that, as you know, that temperature in the fire, and then the mikvah, and then they're fine. And if you use any of them before Tvila, or before Hagala, or before Libun, Tani Chada Asr. One Bryson says that you can't eat the food, but Mutar, and the other says you can eat the food. Velo Kasha, but they're talking about different cases. Hakaman Diyamar Nosin Tam Lifgam Asr. Hakaman Diyamar Nosin Tam Lifgam Mutar. So here we get into the idea of how does a non-kosher pot transmit the non-kosher status of what was cooked in it before? So there's a machokas of whether nosin tam lifgam, if it's a negative flavor, if it's an undesired flavor that it's transmitting, whether that is considered something that makes your food not kosher. So that's what the machlokas is here, whether you can eat it. We were talking about a nosin tam lifgam, that's a negative, an undesirable flavor that's being transmitted. So the machlokas depends on what you hold about that. If you say that that's okay, that an undesirable flavor transmitted doesn't affect the kashrus, so what about like when the Torah says you can't use a pot that's emitting what it's absorbed from an ovid kochavim, from something not kosher. So then there's no such thing. Like if you're saying if that's the definition of nosin tam lifgam, if that's a negative thing that you don't want, so then every kind of non-kosher flavor that's transmitted is permitted. So then what's the Torah even talking about? What's a case of when it's forbidden? The Torah only forbids a pot bas yoma, that's used on the same day. The lavnos in tam lifgamu. So in that case, if it's a fresh flavor that's just been absorbed in the same day, we don't call that nos in tam lifgam. So that's what the Torah is forbidding. So then in that case, from that day on, from like after 24 hours, so you've used it once, right? But then tomorrow you want to use it again, so there shouldn't be a problem, right? Now it's more than 24 hours, so everything is no sin tam lifgam. So our answer is Gzera Kedera Shena Bas Yoma. No, we're not going to allow that because we don't want you to slip up and use it on the first day. Mishum Kedera Bas Yoma. Gzera Kedera Shena Bas Yoma, Mishum Kedera Bas Yoma. We don't want you to get it mixed up. Vidach. Now the one that says that a nosin tam lifgam is also in the first place. Kedera Bas Yoma Name Mifgam Pagma. He would hold that even within the first 24 hours, that's still a tam lifgam. That can still be undesirable flavor. So so that's why there's no distinction between the first day and the following days. So Rav Sheshes, Rav asked Rav Sheshes, Tanan, our Mishnah says, Hashakuni v'askola, the lavna bor, spit and the grill, you have to heat them in fire to make them kosher. When it comes to kachim, if you want to use it for if you want to use the spit or the grill for non-kachim, you only need hot water. You don't need libun. Amarle Rav Amram, Amarle, he said to him, Amram Bri, Amram, my son, Ma'inyan kachim is to guli over the kochavim. What does one have to do the other? Here we're talking about regular cooking with non-kosher food, and here we're talking about kachim. Hacha hetera bala. In the case of kachim, there's nothing non-kosher about it, right? I mean, it has a status of kachim, but it wasn't like it wasn't kosher. Also misura bala, but the like when you know the problem, I guess the problem is maybe the problem is no, sir. One second. Yeah, the problem is no, sir, right? So the problem is not like you're not eating the kachim themselves. It's the flavor that's imparted by it. So would you consider that no, sir, after the expiry date of the carbon? So when the flavor was absorbed into the spit or the grill, it was still within the right time of the carbon. So there's nothing usher about it. And whereas in the case of non-kosher food, when it absorbed it, it was non-kosher food. So that's a different situation. Amarava sof ki kapali tisura kapali. Well, wait a minute. But when you're cooking with it, even the kachim, sure, when it was absorbed, it was during the permitted time period for the carbon. But now the time period has expired. The pot is emitting this flavor into your food, and it's beyond the time of the carbon. So it should be considered no, sir. Elam Rava. So Rava backtracks. Um, and what he how he explains it is my hagala name shtifa marika. When the Mishnah is talking about hagala, it's talking about rinsing it and scrubbing it. So, in other words, the Haggalah that the Mishnah about Kachim is talking about is not the usual Haggalah. It's talking about, cleaning it well, not the kind of process we're talking about here with non-kosher food. So you can't compare the two. Amay Abaye midame. What, you're going to call that Haggalah? Like, why would you use the same word? Mariko Shtifa B'tzanan, Haggalah B'chamin. The Mishnah itself refers to Mariko Shtifa. So it's clearly that's not the Haggalah we're talking about. Abaye has a different answer. Yagid Olavreya. One, reveals something about the other. In other words, in each source, in each Mishnah, we're only telling part of the story. Tanahachi Libun, V'hu Adin Haggalah, the about the non-kosher food. So it tells you about libun, and you also need hagala. It doesn't say that. Tanas hagala v'huadinu libun. And in the other case, in the case of kachim, it only tells you about hagala, but you also need libun. So really, the actual rule is they're both treated the same. Rava says yihache. If that's the case, likninu lukulu b'chada. So, like. Tell us the whole thing. Like if the process is the same, tell us the same thing. This is the process for kachim and for non-kosher food. Um, Velema Yagid Olavreo. And one second. Yeah, so tell us both, tell us the full procedure in one Mishnah. And then the other Mishnah, you could say, like, we're just alluding to the process without telling the whole process, but really the whole process applies to both. But by saying, like, A applies to this and B applies to that, that doesn't seem to be a good way of saying A and B apply to both. Elamarava, Kachim Hainu Tamai. This is the thing with Kachim. Kidu Rav Nachman Amarava Barabu. It's like Rav Nachman. Diamar Kol Yom V'Yom Nasa Giul Chavero. Like you're using the spit or the grill every day, and every day it's both eliminating the previous flavor and absorbing the new flavor. So it's not like it stores it up. Um, so the Gemara says, okay, tinach shlamim, that's okay with shlamim, the kevan the lishnei yamim misachle, mekami denevi nosar kohavigil. Okay, so if a shlamim which has a 2-day limit, so you use it today with the one shlamim, then use it tomorrow with the second shlamim, it's still in the good time period for the first shlamim, so you don't have a problem, right? It spits out the first one during the permissible period for shlamim number one, and it absorbs shlamim number two, and then the following day you'll use it again, and the process will repeat. Will repeat. Alachatas, but what about alachatas? It only has a 1-day period where it is not nosar. When you cook, when you cook the chatas today, by tomorrow it's already nosar. So whatever you use for it tomorrow, kapalit nosar the chatas da'idna, it's going to contaminate the new chatas, right? Because the first chatas, whatever absorbed from the first chatas yesterday, is already nosar. Like in tomorrow's carbon, it's going to make it not permissible because of nosa. Amrei Sigmar says lo tzricha. No, when you first use it for a chatas, hadar mavashal b'ha'idna shlamim. You use it on the same day for a shlamim, so it spits out the chatas on the same day, absorbs the shlamim, and then the next day it is emitting the shlamim, but that's still within the permissible period of the shlamim. The chatas l'machor shlamim diasmal. So the chatas tomorrow is picking up not the chatas from yesterday, but it's picking up the shlamim from yesterday. So, if this is the case, by the way, you'd have to have a pretty sophisticated system of keeping track of what you used for. Maybe there was just like this big grill and they did the chatas first and then they did the shlamim. So it all works out. So Ba'adi Kashlalim Zimnayu. So the times finish at the same time. And then you cook tomorrow's shlamim, and you're good. If that's the case, you don't even need hagala. You don't need anything because it's had libun, right? Kasha, yeah, good question. You shouldn't need hagala, but you do. Rav Papa has a different view. Hi, karid, hi, lo karid. So the distinction between kosher, non-kosher versus kachim and nosar is that the non-kosher food cooked by the Ovid Kochavim, so that kind of it hardens in the pot. But kachim, since it's like being used constantly, it's being used every day, it doesn't have a chance to kind of really take hold. Okay, so it's easier to get the kachim out, to get the nosar out, than it is to get the non-kosher food out. Rav Ashi Amar, Liolam Kedamara Meikara. No, we'll go back to the first thing. The first resolution, Hacha Terabala, Hacha Isurabala. That the difference is that when it absorbed the taste, so in the case of kachim, it was fine. When it absorbed it, it was completely, not nosar. In the case of the non-kosher food, when it absorbed it, it was already not kosher. So you're going to ask, well, what's the difference? Like we said earlier, we said it's fine that it was absorbed when it was still kosher, but it's aging there in the pot and becomes nosar before it gets emitted. Lo no, we don't say that because there's no actual, there's nothing tangible. There's a flavor that's being emitted, but that maybe doesn't become nosar. Only a tangible piece of meat can become nosar. Next question is, how do you have to, what is libun? How hot does it have to get? Until the kind of, you would say that the outer layer is burnt off. Okay, so it's a little unclear, but I think that we interpret that in contemporary halacha as you have to heat it to at least as hot as it ever got when it was absorbing the undesired flavor. The case of Megillah, what about Haggalah? How does that work? Amar Huna, Yora, and by the way, I'm going to try and since we're going to do the Siyum tonight, I'm going to try to get as far as I can here so that we just can finish up at the Siyum. The case of Magilan, how do you do Hagala? Amar Huna, Yarab Katana Betoch Yar Gadala. You have basically you take your pot that you want to kasher and you put it in a larger pot of boiling water. That's how you do Hagala. Yargadolamai, what do you do with the biggest pot you have? How do you capture that one? Tashma. Who duda the Hawaii Bay Ravakavia. There was this big pot that Ravakavia had. Aderle, Garafna Gedanfa Delisha Apuma. He put like a rim of dough around the top of it, so it could be completely filled up. Umalyu Hamayav Artacha, and so he built up a little extra rim so that he could boil water in it even over the top of the lip of the actual pot. Amarava, Malchakim Lamava Kihamilsa. Who could be so smart to do that? You love Rabbi Kavya the Gavar Rabbahu. Only Rabbi Kavya could think of such a brilliant idea. Kasavar Kavalo Kachpalto. And so what did he think, or what was his logic here? The rule is that to get rid of absorbed flavor, uh, you you have to use, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the at least the heat that was the way it was absorbed. So at least that amount of heat, or that way that it was absorbed, that's how you get it to emit it, to spit it out. Ma bolo ben nitzotzos. So just as the non-kosher stuff was absorbed through like splattering of the non-kosher food. Um, in other words, the at the very top of the pot, the lip of the pot, which doesn't hold water, right? So that isn't considered the same as the water within the pot. The water within the pot, it has to be boiling, right? It has to be filled with water up to that point. But the lip of the pot only needs like splashes of you could just pour water on it, basically. Um, Hot water, that is. Okay, so that was Akavya's brilliant idea. And the last thing in the Mishnah, Hasakin. 1 second. Yeah, maybe we'll stop here and finish it up at the Siyum. So we'll stop at the two dots, 5 lines from the top. Okay, everybody, have a good day. And are we having Siyum tonight? I lost the thread. I guess I'll check my email. Okay, have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you.